On the 11th of June 1955, one crash at the 24 Hours of Le Mans did not just kill 84 people. It nearly killed the sport of racing itself. It forced governments to question whether motor racing should continue. It pushed several countries to ban or suspend racing while safety was reviewed. It sent Mercedes-Benz, one of the strongest manufacturers in the world, into a long withdrawal from factory-backed motorsport. And it left one question hanging over the entire sport. How could the race possibly continue? The 1955 Le Mans race was supposed to be one of the greatest endurance battles ever held. Mercedes-Benz, Jaguar, Ferrari, Aston Martin, Maserati, and other manufacturers came to prove their speed, engineering, reliability, and prestige. Le Mans was not just a race. It was a test of machines, drivers, teams, and national pride over 24 hours. But by 1955, the cars had become much faster than the safety systems around them. The circuit still carried the weaknesses of an older racing age. The pits were dangerously close to the racing line. Spectators were protected by barriers that were not built for cars moving at such extreme speeds. Different classes of cars shared the same track, meaning fast cars constantly had to pass slower ones. That was the central danger of Le Mans in 1955. The cars had entered the modern era, but the safety environment had not. When the disaster finally happened, it was not only a crash. It was proof that motorsport had moved too fast for its own protection. This is the full story of the 1955 Le Mans disaster. The day racing was forced to face the cost of speed. Welcome to Dark Sports Stories, where we uncover the tragedies, scandals, rivalries, comebacks, and legacies that changed sport forever. Tonight, we go back to Le Mans, 1955, the race that became motorsport's darkest warning. To understand why the disaster shook the world, we need to understand what Le Mans represented in 1955. The 24 Hours of Le Mans was one of the most important endurance races on Earth. Winning it proved that a car could survive more than a short burst of speed. It had to brake, accelerate, handle, cool itself, save fuel, survive mechanical stress, and keep running through day, night, traffic, and pressure. Manufacturers treated Le Mans as a public test of superiority. Mercedes-Benz arrived with huge ambition. Their 300 SLR was one of the most advanced sports racing cars of its period. It was fast, light, and technically impressive. Mercedes had already built a strong racing reputation in the 1950s, and Le Mans was part of a wider campaign to show dominance. Jaguar was also a major force. The Jaguar D-Type was designed for speed and had powerful disc brakes, giving it stopping power that many older or slower cars could not match. Mike Hawthorn was one of Jaguar's key drivers. He was fast, aggressive, and admired in Britain. But by the end of this day, many people would see him differently. Not only as a winning driver, but as the man whose move helped trigger the chain of events that led to disaster. Austin-Healey was also in the race, including the car driven by Macklin. His car was not fighting the leaders in the same way the Jaguars and Mercedes were. That difference mattered. Le Mans was a multi-class race. Faster cars and slower cars shared the same circuit at the same time. The closing speeds could be enormous. A leading car could approach a slower car very quickly, especially near the pit area and main straight. In modern racing, pit entry is separated much more clearly from the racing line. In 1955, the pit area at Le Mans was far more exposed. Cars slowing for the pits did so close to cars still racing at high speed. That created a dangerous situation before the crash ever happened. The race began as expected, fast, intense, and competitive. But all the warning signs were already there. Fast cars, slower traffic, different braking abilities, an exposed pit area, spectators too close to the danger, and a circuit that had not fully adapted to the speed of the machines racing on it. The disaster did not come from one simple cause. It came from a chain of problems meeting at the worst possible moment. The crash involved 3 key drivers and 3 key cars. The first was Mike Hawthorn in the Jaguar D-Type. Hawthorn was racing near the front and fighting for Jaguar in one of the biggest endurance races in the world. His car had strong disc brakes. That gave him a major advantage, but it also created a problem when he slowed suddenly near cars that could not react in the same way. The second was Lance Macklin in the Austin-Healey 100S. Macklin was driving a slower car than the front-running Jaguars and Mercedes. Like many drivers in endurance racing, he had to manage his own race while constantly being passed by faster machines. The third was Pierre Levegh in the Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR. Levegh was an experienced French driver. In 1952, he had almost won Le Mans after driving for an extraordinary length of time before mechanical failure ended his challenge. In 1955, he was driving for Mercedes in one of the fastest cars in the field. Behind him was Juan Manuel Fangio, another Mercedes driver and one of the greatest racing drivers of all time. Fangio was close enough to the accident sequence that he had to react immediately to survive it. The key issue was not only who these drivers were, it was how different their cars were. The Jaguar could slow very quickly. The Austin-Healey was slower and less advanced. The Mercedes was extremely fast and approaching from behind. This difference became deadly near the pit area. The chain reaction began when Hawthorn passed Macklin and then moved toward the pits. Hawthorn slowed hard. Macklin, reacting to the Jaguar suddenly slowing in front of him, moved left to avoid it. At that same moment, Levegh was arriving at high speed in the Mercedes. Macklin's move put the Austin-Healey into Levegh's path. Levegh had almost no time to escape. This was the critical sequence. One car slowing for the pits. One car swerving to avoid it. One faster car arriving from behind. A narrow margin. A track layout that gave no real protection. And a crowd sitting close enough to be hit by the consequences. The crash was now only seconds away. The collision happened on the main straight near the pits. Hawthorn had moved toward the pit area after passing Macklin. Because the pit entry was not separated from the racing line the way it would be today, his braking forced Macklin to react suddenly. Macklin swerved left. Levegh, approaching at much higher speed in the Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR, struck Macklin's Austin-Healey. The impact launched the Mercedes into the air, The car crossed toward the spectator area and hit the earth bank and structures near the grandstand. Then it broke apart. Large pieces of the car flew into the crowd. The engine, front suspension, and other heavy components became deadly projectiles. Levegh was thrown from the car and killed. Spectators were struck by debris. Others were caught in the fire that followed. One detail made the aftermath even worse. The Mercedes was built partly from magnesium alloy, a metal that is incredibly light, but once it catches fire, it burns with a white-hot intensity that water cannot easily put out. That meant the fire was not like an ordinary car fire. It was harder to control, more violent, and more frightening for rescue workers, who were facing a disaster far beyond what the era was prepared for. Fire crews responded, but the firefighting knowledge and equipment of the time were not ready for a crash of this scale. In the spectator area, the damage was catastrophic. People had come to watch a race. Many were standing or sitting in areas considered normal viewing spots for that period. But the crash proved those areas were nowhere near safe enough for cars moving at Le Mans speeds. The disaster unfolded in seconds. Its impact lasted for decades. 84 people died, including Pierre Levegh. Many more were injured. It remains the deadliest crash in motorsport history. The important point is that this disaster was not caused by one single movement alone. It was caused by a dangerous combination. The pit layout was outdated. The cars were extremely fast. The braking differences between cars were significant. Spectator protection was weak. The circuit had not kept pace with the machines racing on it. The 1955 Le Mans disaster became more than an accident. It became evidence that motorsport had entered a new age without building the safety systems required to survive it. And while smoke was still rising, while victims were being moved, and while people were trying to understand what had just happened, the most unbelievable part of the story was about to begin. The race continued. One of the most controversial facts about the 1955 Le Mans disaster is that the race was not stopped. For many people today, that is almost impossible to understand. How could a race continue after the deadliest accident in motorsport history? The decision has been debated ever since. One explanation given at the time was crowd control. Officials feared that stopping the race immediately could cause tens of thousands of spectators to leave at once. That could block roads needed by ambulances, police, doctors, and emergency vehicles. In other words, they believed stopping the race might make rescue work harder. That explanation helps us understand the decision. It does not remove the moral shock of it. The race continued through the night. Drivers kept driving, teams kept working. Cars kept passing the same area where the disaster had happened. Mercedes-Benz later withdrew its remaining cars from the race as a mark of respect. Jaguar continued. Mike Hawthorn, sharing with Ivor Webb, went on to win. That victory became one of the most controversial victories in racing history. Hawthorn's role in the accident was argued over for years. Some blamed his sudden braking and move toward the pits. Others argued that the track design, pit layout, speed differences, and safety standards were the deeper causes. The official investigation did not place criminal responsibility on a single driver. But public debate did not end there. For some, Hawthorn was still the winner of Le Mans. For others, his victory was forever tied to the disaster that happened before it. That is what makes this race so difficult to separate from its tragedy. The result exists. The trophy exists. The record book exists. But Le Mans 1955 is not remembered for who won. It is remembered for who never went home. Once the race ended, the impact spread far beyond France. Governments, racing authorities, manufacturers and circuit owners all had to respond. This was no longer only a tragedy at one race, it had become an international motorsport crisis.
After Le Mans, the reaction was immediate. Newspaper headlines spread across countries: France, Britain, Germany, Italy, the United States. The question was no longer only what happened at Le Mans. The question became whether motor racing itself had become too dangerous to continue. For the edit, this is the moment to break the rhythm with a short headline montage. Le Mans horror. Racing disaster. Scores dead. Motorsport under fire. Should racing be banned? Several countries temporarily banned or suspended motor racing while safety standards were reviewed. Switzerland introduced one of the most famous bans. For decades, circuit racing was heavily restricted there because of the reaction to the Le Mans disaster. That shows how deeply the crash affected public attitudes toward motorsport. Mercedes-Benz made one of the biggest decisions in its racing history. After the 1955 season, the company withdrew from factory-backed motorsport for many years. The Le Mans disaster was not the only reason, but it became central to the memory of that decision. The Circuit de la Sarthe also had to change. Le Mans had to modernize. The pit area, grandstands, spectator protection and track safety standards were reassessed. Over time, motorsport moved toward better barriers, clearer pit separation, stronger emergency response, improved circuit design, and greater awareness of spectator safety. These changes did not happen overnight. Motorsport remained dangerous for many years. But Le Mans 1955 forced the sport to accept that tradition was not enough. Speed had changed. Car technology had changed. Crowd sizes had changed. Safety had to change too. Before 1955, danger was often treated as part of racing's identity. Drivers accepted risk. Spectators accepted risk. Organisers accepted risk. But Le Mans showed that risk could no longer be treated casually when one crash could kill dozens of people outside the car. The disaster did not end endurance racing. Le Mans continued. Motorsport continued. Manufacturers returned. Fans kept watching. But after 1955, the sport could no longer pretend that speed alone was progress. The lesson of Le Mans 1955 is simple. When technology moves forward, safety must move with it. If it does not, the price can be unbearable. On the 11th of June 1955, Le Mans became the darkest day in motorsport. It showed the world what happens when cars become faster than the systems built to protect people from them. Even today, nearly every discussion about motorsport safety carries the shadow of that race. The 1955 Le Mans disaster remains a warning,
not against racing itself, but against ignoring the gap between speed and safety. Because the real legacy of Le Mans 1955 is not only what was lost, it is what motorsport was forced to learn after the loss. If this story pulled you in, like this video, comment Le Mans 1955 and subscribe to Dark Sports Stories for more documentaries about the tragedies, scandals, rivalries, comebacks and legacies that changed sport forever.